Well, it is time for your video on register balance. Hopefully by now you've had the chance to read at least one of the articles from Kevin Michael Jones. Oh, sorry. Just like a real lesson. I love the way he talks about register balance. One of the things that I appreciate so much about his writing is that he and I studied musical theater pedagogy from the same teachers, Jeannie LaVetrie and Matt Edwards. So we have a philosophical similarity, and I love that he has diagrams and is willing to get all scientific about it. For those of you who appreciate hearing things in a very scientific fashion. I'm also going to describe things for you in a less scientific fashion, just because everybody's brains work differently and because it's really useful to have the same information presented to you in a myriad of ways so that you can start to interpret it and make it your own. Sorry. Okay. Generally, many of you have heard this speech before. Your vocal folds are in the shape of a V, and the point of the V is in the front of your larynx here. And like he says, if you swallow a couple times, you can feel your larynx move up and down. So vocal folds are shaped like a V. The point is in the front, and there are two main muscles that dictate what's happening with your voice. There's the chest voice muscle, or TA, thyroarytenoid, and that is a closing muscle. So when the TA is working, your vocal folds get thick and short, and when they're waving together, when they make sound, because they're thick and short, they're making contact with each other a lot of the time. This is why chest voice can tend to be really strong and clear and focused, because the vocal folds are touching most of the time that you're making sound. So those are the pros of using chest voice. The con of chest voice is because that muscle is a closing muscle and just brings the vocal folds together, it doesn't have any stretch, meaning that there is a literal limit on how high you can sing if you're only singing in chest voice. Because we make higher pitches by lengthening the vocal folds and thinning them out. The muscle that is in charge of that is the cricothyroid muscle, or CT. The muscles are named by what they attach to. So for simplicity's sake, I usually call them chest voice muscle and head voice muscle. So when your CT is in charge, vocal folds get long and skinny, and less of the surface is contacting when they're vibrating. This is why sometimes, especially as voices are first developing, head voice can be really light and airy because less of the surface of the vocal folds is making contact when you're vibrating. And so literally air will go through the openings in the vocal folds as you are singing. In an ideal world, in both classical and musical theater, we have an equal balance of both muscles so that you can access either register at any time, depending on the choices that you want to make in terms of color, character, and all those sorts of things. Because what we're looking for is the best of both worlds. We want the voice to be strong and clear and focused, just like it is when we're using chest voice, but we never want to lose the ability to stretch and get into the extension of our range. So even when we're in kind of a chesty registration, we still want to have a little bit of head voice activity so that you can pop up to the high part of your voice whenever you want to. So I always tell people what we're looking for, if you think of like scales, we need to have both parts of the voice equally strong so that they can start to talk to each other and work at the same time. So if you are a person who only uses chest voice, just kidding, none of you are allowed to only use chest voice, you will have to do some strengthening of head voice to even begin to try and get the registers to work together. And vice versa, some sopranos who only ever sing in head voice need to spend some time sort of waking up chest so that we can get a little bit more vocal fold closure in the sound. People who sing only in head voice will eventually sort of lose the stability of the pitch as they age. I mean, like way age, like 80, because the head voice muscle is only stretchy. It doesn't close. And so when people get older, or if they develop a neurological condition like Parkinson's, where there's sort of a waver in the voice, if they don't work on activating chest voice, we start to get sort of a wobbly sound. And sort of the stereotypical example of that is the sweet, wonderful older lady in the church choir who's been singing for like 50 years. Amazing grace. Because there's no force that sort of draws the vocal folds together. So if they're just long and skinny and the edges are sort of contacting intermittently, the sound will start to lose its stable core over time. That won't happen to you because we're going to balance your registers. So all of you are working on a little bit of something to keep working on your less dominant register. So most of my musical theater students, that means you have some things that are kind of activating head voice all the time. This is also why we give you higher sitting repertoire, especially when you're doing your classical things, because we're looking to keep building up that stamina. Most of my tenors and baritones, we do isolated falsetto exercises for this exact reason. Everybody has a little bit of range extension. So everybody's got a little bit of something that they're working on with this. And I'm going to show you all of the exercises that I use so that you can take a look at all of them and think about what might suit you best or what you're most interested in working on. If there's one that you're sort of like, maybe just pick that one and do it. So I've got 3, 4 exercises to show you. The first one, the classic, many of you know and love it, is the weightlifting scale. And this is usually for people who are working on developing a mix. So I use it a lot with my treble belters. I don't use it that much with tenors and baritones because most of them have a pretty heavy chest dominant production. I don't mean heavy in a bad way, I mean proportion of use, like most chest most of the time. So usually with treble belters, once we've sort of developed the head voice and we've got it working, we start to deliberately change up what we're doing in terms of register. So we start down in A major below middle C by activating and waking up really heavy chest. That's why I call it the weightlifting voice. It's just like, it's not a voice for people, it's not a performing voice. We're just trying to get that closing muscle to work. Then so you start by waking up chest voice and getting really active and getting lots and lots and lots of closure. Then you jump up an octave and we are automatically going to go into a little bit more of a heady place. And then what happens as you come back down, and I deliberately let my voice crack as I came down just a little bit, is you sort of negotiate that shift of registers as you come back down. The secret benefit of this exercise is because you have just worked really hard on closing with the chest voice muscle, you get a little bit of that residual closure even when you go to a more head voice place at the top of the scale. So I'll do a couple more of these just so you can see how they work. And then if you love it, I recommend starting low enough that you have to use or you will use chest voice to start. And you can go kind of high as long as you can still sing the bottom notes in chest. So I wouldn't go too much higher than like F major up here, just because you don't want to be like screaming your face off. So And the more you do it, the smoother the connections from register to register will get. I'm showing you all the cracks right now just so you understand that that's a very normal part of the process. Another variation that I sometimes do is if it's really hard to focus in the head voice, we'll use ni. So I'll show you what that sounds like now. Ah, ni, 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 ni. And using that little bit of resonance helps you find a little bit more of a match between what's happening in the bottom and what's happening in the top. The other thing that you'll notice as you do this over time is you do not end the descending scale in the same place that you started. Ah, that's really, really heavy and honky, and I would not use that sound unless I was trying to be funny. Nee, 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 nee. This one, nee, is not the same as nee, which is probably going to come through on the recording as louder, but more than just being louder, I can feel a real sort of pressure in that sound, and I can tell that it's not going to get me very far. The other thing is that if you want to test the balance, you can try to go back up when you're done. I'll show you what I mean by that. Ah, nee, 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 ah, ee. If you can get back up to the top and do that high octave again, then you're pretty in pretty good shape in terms of not adding too much weight as you come down. The point is you got to use your banana and think about the resonance coming forward, 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 and then it sort of disguises the shifts that are happening here at the vocal fold level, the resonance and the uniformity of the vowel. So you will always feel the shifts on the inside. But our job is to sort of create this illusion for the listener that it's all one voice and nothing will disturb it. I'll show you my falsetto-based exercise that I use with many tenors and basses. I don't usually use this with treble belters, but maybe I'm asking myself why not. I'm also asking myself why I don't use the weightlifting scale with tenors and basses. Try it. Let me know what you find. So with tenors, baritones, basses, we start in the falsetto on purpose, and usually we do some stretching of it first, and then we start to add some weight. So to demonstrate this, we'll do ooh, and generally I'll have tenors, baritones, basses do lots of repetitions of that because many of us are working on continuing to wake up and strengthen that muscle. So once we've done a bunch of those, we'll start to do the same pattern, but then when we get back to do, ooh, we'll then crescendo the ooh as loud as we can. Ooh, carefully, you can start to hear that I start in kind of a pure falsetto. For me, it's this head voice. I mean, the terms are interchangeable. They mean the same thing. For me, it's really heady and thin. And then as I do the crescendo, because I've been working on register balance for a long time, it not only gets louder, but there's a little bit more closure and a little bit more clarity that comes into the sound. That's because I'm actually sort of requiring that chest voice muscle to come on board to support the crescendo. Ooh. So then, of course, advanced applications of this exercise come in once you've done, so ooh is great because it elicits use of the head voice. It's harder on other vowels. So usually when somebody has started to master the ooh crescendo, we ask them then also to change the vowel. trying to figure out is if this new muscle configuration will hold steady even when we change sort of the shape of the vocal tract and what's happening sort of above the vocal fold level. For some people in the very beginning, the ah will start to be a little bit shaky. And not quite as stable as the oo crescendo was. But by continuing to do the exercise over time, gets a little bit stronger and a little bit more clear. Then when you've got that all figured out, we go to master's degree level application, where then you then test the coordination by singing down the scale, just like you do in the weightlifting exercise, only backwards. So I showed you how it cracked on the way down too. So once I've gotten the chest voice muscle on board and I've gotten the closure that I want, I then take a breath and try to take that coordination down the scale with me and see if it will hold up. La. My new favorite exercise I got from Matt Edwards, and this one we sort of deliberately cross the registers. So, and this will work for anybody. You basically start above the break, like right above the break. So you can sing the top note above the break and the bottom note below, and then we're going to cross in between. So for me, for all of you, I think that means we would start at about D major. So D is your bottom note and G is the top note. So you're going to start light, E, go to chest, E, 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 and sort of work your way down. E, 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 The reason I'm separating every note is because it gives me time to decide how I want each one to come out in terms of registration and balance. Later on, you can start to connect them, especially when the transitions start working more automatically for you. That's why I said aha to you, because by about the third one, my breaks were starting to smooth out and I could sort of go through without having to work so hard to think about what was going to happen next. And that's a really great sign that you are on the right track to having it all balanced out. I'll also say that register balance is fluid. I spent this summer singing mostly musical theater and pop songs, and so much more chest focused. And so now when I'm back to my classical, I'm sort of recalibrating register balance. It's not starting completely over, but I have to pay more close attention to how things are working because I spent so much time in chest in the last little bit. So also, like my very first semester at Plymouth State, the main stage show was Spring Awakening. And so it's really rock heavy, very chest focused. And so with those cast members, we had to spend a lot of time exercising head voice and keeping that loose and fresh so that they could sing all their other repertoire and avoid excessive fatigue during the production period. So just really important tools for the overall health of your voice and some specific ways that you can use this information to keep yourself healthy and well when you are not feeling your best. The other thing I'll say is when I'm really, really tired, my register breaks are a little bit more prominent and I have to work a little bit harder to keep them smooth. And so it's normal if you've been a little sick or you're really out of it to feel a little bit more bumpy through there. And it doesn't mean that your work is not working. It just means that human bodies are amazing and change every day. Yay! All right. Happy exploring. Pick one of those to work on. Let me know how it's going, and I'll be excited to hear your questions as they develop. Bye.